Hello and welcome to this first presentation which talks about the MBA Management Project requirements. This diagram shows a difference between the academic and the practitioner domains of knowledge. The academics can be characterised as being broad but shallow. The practitioner, on the other hand, can be characterised as being deep but narrow. The academic world is more interested in the generalised and often decontextualised, whereas a practitioner's world is interested in the current and the specific. The sweet spot is between the academic and the practitioner domains of knowledge. The learning objectives for the MBA Management Project are therefore to be able to resource and apply relevant literature, which is the generalised and the decontextualised, but to apply them to your particular context, which is the current and specific. So it's about being able to access, collect data and make decisions about its usefulness. To be able to synthesise argument where the key words are analyse, synthesise and evaluate. It's also about developing an adequate method and methodology for addressing the research question. During your project you will be required to define, but also over consecutive iterations to redefine the project to within a manageable scope given the constraints that you have in terms of time and resource. The sixth learning objective is to be able to organise and present material relevant to the project, to be able to work in a relatively unsupervised manner, and also to manage yourself via the organisation of the project itself. Ultimately, the goal is to be able to work at the master's level. Continuing on with the project requirements, it is important to point out that the literature is only supportive and not a research project in itself. There has to be some data which has to be analysed. This can be primary and or secondary data. The project is concerned with problem solving and should have a strong policy-based thrust and a sound conceptual basis. It must be of a sufficient scope so as to allow a detailed analysis, and you must work independently of others, with the exception of your academic mentor. You need to bear in mind that with a 60 credit project it is the equivalent of 600 hours or 16 weeks of full-time work. It is quite an undertaking. And also, secondly, do not be taken in by the fact that it is 6 times larger than a 10 credit or 3 times larger than a 20 credit module, because the relationship between the module and the word count is geometric, not arithmetic. That is because it needs to make sense as a coherent whole over 15,000 words. As previously mentioned, the word count is 15,000 words. There is a penalty, and that penalty is 1% off for every 1% over that you exceed 15,000 words. The word limit excludes references at the back, diagrams, abstracts and table. For more information, refer to the document Management Project Guidelines. The Management Project is the last stage of your MBA. I'm sure you don't need me to point that out to you. But as a reminder, let's think about the journey that you've gone along. You started off with 4 20 credit core modules. You then completed 4 10 credit modules for the elective modules, which were ones of your choice. A third of the MBA is the Management Project, and this is incredibly important because it predicates the final classification that you will get for your MBA. And here is how the degree classification is calculated. It's easier to start off with a distinction and work backwards from the merit to the MBA itself. In order to succeed with a distinction on an MBA, you need an overall weighted average in all the modules, which includes the Management Project of 68%. So that weighted average actually includes the Management Project, which works well because if you do well on your Management Project, it also lifts that average score to 68. You also need at least 70% in the MBA Management Project in order to achieve the distinction. In order to achieve a merit, the principles are the same, but the boundaries are obviously different. And the boundaries are 58% in the overall average weighted average and at least 60% in the management project itself. Finally, in order to succeed for the classification of an MBA, you need to have achieved 40% in modules amounting to 160 credits or at least 35% in modules amounting to the other 20 credits, which means that you can condone marks between 35 and 39 for 20 credits and still achieve an MBA. If you are interested in having a look at previous projects, and some people are, some people, like me, tend not to want to look at other people's templates and come up with our own, but the choice is yours, then the library offer the service that's available from that link at the bottom. If you want to talk or email the subject librarian, who is called Sarah Clark, the email address is at the bottom there. So following this link will show you how to get to the MBA projects, and it also allows you to have a look at those that achieved a distinction. You also have access to the last 5 years of MBA projects online. So what's the sequence of events and where does this all start? First of all, may I just say you may find the first part of your MBA management project a little bit frustrating. There are things that we need to set up with you. Managers, by their very persuasion, like to get in and do things. But unfortunately, there are some things that we have to set up with you in order for you to be successful in the management project. It's no use getting to the final 90% and realise there was something that had to be done right at the very beginning. So the first is about make sure you have the appropriate scope. First thing that you need to do is what's known as the Readiness Assurance Test. The Readiness Assurance Test enables you to have the confidence that you are familiar with method and research methodology. It's based on a previous module that we had called Business Research, and it will enable you to have a wide appreciation of the various methods that can be employed in your MBA project. You only need to pass this Readiness Assurance Test. It doesn't count towards your final MBA. The reason that we have rearranged it in this particular manner rather than having it as something that counts towards your MBA is, first of all, it's actually tested in the MBA Management Project, but also by the time that people had done the business research module before, what tended to happen is by the time they got to the MBA project itself, they'd forgotten everything. So that's obviously no good, and it's actually at the MBA Management Project where you need it the most. The second part is what's known as a Management Project Quiz, and again you need to be able to pass this. And again, this is about making sure that people are familiar with the requirements before they actually go on to the MBA Management Project itself. The reason this is there is because, again, many MBAs dive in and ask basic questions of their supervisor like, what's the word count? Or what counts towards? How many bibliographic references do I need? And that is to ensure that the academic mentor's time and your time are there for the best value. So having completed those first two elements, then you will submit the project registration form. The project registration form is something that will be available online to you, and that will give us an idea of what your management project is going to be about so that we can assign an academic mentor to you. So the fourth stage is the academic mentor is actually appointed, and then you go on to prepare your project proposal. And it is important to realise that the management project proposal is different to the project registration form. Again, a source of a great deal of confusion early on in the process. The project registration form is a few lines around your title of what it's going to be. The project proposal is a risk analysis, which is going to ask you, where are you going to get your literature? Where are you going to get your data from? How are you going to synthesize? What methodology are you going to use? Do we know that there's some literature that actually exists in this particular area? Having then got your project proposal, which again is a risk analysis, you then proceed to ethics approval. You cannot collect data until you've had ethics approval. You must not collect data until you have had ethics approval. Now, of course, you can't get to ethics approval before you know what data that you are going to collect, and you can't collect the data until you understand some of the basics around data collection and analysis. Finally, in what you might call the prequel to the management project is the student learning agreement, and the student learning agreement ensures that the relationship between you and the mentor, that there is a management of expectations between the two different parties. Academic mentors work in different ways, and this is to make sure that it's something that's negotiated between you and the academic mentor, so it works, the relationship works to its best effect. And here is what a project proposal looks like. This is one that's available to you from Canvas. It is a hypothetical one that I have put together, and it goes through the titles that you need to fill out. There is a template that's available to you, so you don't have to use the example and take all the text out. So, for example, you can see what the scope of the project is going to be, what the deliverables are going to be, the benefit and impact statement, what the intervention question or research question is going to be, and also some idea of what your method and methodology is going to be about. Now, because this doesn't count towards your final MBA project, you can use that methodology section in order to be able to cut and paste it into your final project. And this is what the ethics form looks like. So the ethics form, you start this, so you'll provide the information, you will then send it to your academic mentor, who will then sign it off, and then you will send the form to the ethics committee, and you and the academic will hear back as to whether you've been successful or whether you need to make modifications to it. Importantly, the current version that you need on the 60 credit management project is the one that is labelled April 2019. And here is what the student learning agreement looks like. And again, it's important to realise that the current version is version 6.0. This is a simplified version. We have cut down the amount of information that is required. And it goes through the student details, the academic mentors details, a brief description of your management project. But importantly, we're going to expand on this on the next slide, are the deadlines, and also who is your nominated academic contact if for some reason your academic mentor is not available, then that is the backup person who you will contact. There is a separate presentation on the interactions with your mentor, but I thought it would be appropriate to be able to go through them under this particular presentation. As part of the SLA, the Student Learning Agreement, you will propose an estimated date of completion for a gated system. So those goes from gate 1 to 7 for proposal, ethics, introduction or first chapter, literature review, discussion of results, analysis chapter when the final draft is going to be submitted. So this column of estimated date of completion is what you will complete on your SLA. The second column, which you don't need to complete, is the actual date of completion, and this then forms part of a monthly report that you will send to your academic mentor when initiated by your academic mentor, so that between you can see how you are progressing. Every meeting, it's necessary for you to send an agenda. Now, that agenda can be just 2 or 3 items, and I doubt that any academic mentor would say, if you wanted to introduce something that you just thought of, say that's not on the agenda. But the idea is for you to have an idea of what it is that you need to know from the academic mentor in order to be able to really focus your mind. It acts as a reminder to your academic mentor of what is required of them for the meeting. And also, after the meeting, is that you provide minutes of any decisions and any action points. These are provided by you. And again, the idea is not to have a hostage to fortune here. It's more about what the progression is. It doesn't need to be very long, just 2 or 3 lines is absolutely fine, so that we have some provenance of how your management project is advancing. These 2 parts plus the gated system will allow us to track the how far you're off of completion. So those monthly reports and actual completion will be available to you every month, and you'll be prompted by your academic mentor in order to be able to send these along. The way the gated system works is once you are deemed to have passed that particular stage, then your academic mentor will grant you that particular stage and you'll go on to the next one. We do realise that sometimes it doesn't quite work out like that, but there is some flexibility there. It is, in academic vernacular, highly recommended that you use EndNote or some equivalent software to manage your references. In this day and age, it is partly inconceivable that you will be using this manually. There are lots of errors that you can introduce through your referencing, which is why we virtually insist that everybody uses some form of software. To me, in this day and age, it's almost the same as submitting something for a dissertation which has not been word processed. It's there. There is an extra penalty in the sense that you need to learn something and set some extra time aside, but the benefits, in my view, far outweigh the investment of time that you need. It's available free. There is a link at the bottom of the page which shows you where you can get further information, and in fact this is a screen capture of the information that's available from the library. There are also library sessions that are available to you online which will demonstrate you how to use EndNote. It's something that you can't really do without, especially for the management project. And if you've been following the format for the MBA assignments, you will have been using some form of electronic bibliographic information in any case. Just to emphasise, it doesn't have to be EndNote. You can use, there is one that's actually embedded in Word, and there are various other commercial ones and free versions that are available for you as well. But please, in this day and age, do not use anything other than an electronic bibliographic database. And just a reminder around plagiarism. I know this is kind of fairly unhappy learning, as someone once said to me. There should be no falsification of data. If you are suspected of falsifying your data, then we will conduct an academic integrity on you. If the plagiarism shows up when you submit, then we will again conduct an academic integrity case on your piece of work. Plagiarism is claiming somebody else's work as your own. And just to add that these are the requirements that we look for, and plagiarism is basically considered as being anything which has been cut and paste of more than 2 sentences. It is a point system that we use when we investigate academic integrity, and the penalty that is applied will be in direct relation to the extent to which the plagiarism is detected. So obviously here below 10% with critical aspects gets 105, and the maximum penalty at the bottom is impersonation by a third party, submission of a purchase from an essay mill or ghostwriting service. please, please, please be aware of plagiarism and make sure that your management project is written entirely in your own words. If not, we have the software, it will find out and we will investigate. So what you need to do is, when you submit, give yourself time to do a Turnitin report, and this will give you the level of similarity. This is a similarity index. You'll notice at the top left there is a similarity index of 70, which is in red, and this was a case that I came across where it was submitted to the University of Mauritius. In this particular case, the participant was actually employed by the University of Mauritius, and he put it through his own university, which is how it gets picked up. And you can see there 2% from studymode.com, classic.co.uk as 1%. Anything around those, especially if it was red, we would have a look at it and just double check to make sure that you weren't using quotes within your text. And if there's anything that's above 2 sentences, it will be conducted for academic integrity. We will go on to some happier learning than the past few slides when we've been talking about academic integrity in the further presentations. Thank you for watching.